Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and gapfactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show is being brought to you, of course, by Charger Bolt Family, UFC Fit, Brewery X, and Manscaped. Make sure you go to manscaped.com, use the promo code LAFB20 to get 20% off your next purchase. Go to manscaped.com for more details. Dan, we made it.
We made it. We are live. We are broadcasting. We apologize to all of our viewers and listeners if there is something said or done that we make a mistake. Crack open a cold one.
Something said or done right here.
There we go. Jake, that reminds me of a hat that I'm wearing. What are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, I actually switched it up from the usual Slap and Tickle IPA. Now tonight it is actually the Dictionary Roulette Hazy IPA that I am taking in tonight. Well, kind of by default because I finished the end of the Slap and Tickle that I had. So this was what was remaining from the stash. But Dan, we're here. What I meant by we made it is that this is the final night of the purgatory season that I have been saying for the past several weeks that I hate. We kick off Chargers training camp tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Dan, I know you're going to be there with a lot of the other representatives of the LAFB family. And how good is it just going to be to have fans back at training camp? Amongst everything else that we're going to be talking about tonight, we get to go to training camp. The fans are back. Football is truly back in its natural state that we have not seen in over a year.
I seriously cannot wait. It feels like it's Christmas Eve. Santa's got like the cookies out. We're like ready to go with presents. And tomorrow morning, Jake, we get to see football live in pads, in action. Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert, Brandon Staley, the new coaching staff. There are so many storylines that we get to go through. But before we get into that, we want to make sure that this is going to be as fun as possible for those viewing and listening. We have a live Q&A. If you guys want to submit your questions, we will take them on the fly. We will submit them and showcase them on the screen live as we go. We've already got a few comments in here, Jake, that we'll bring up to you. But this is going to be a fun, interactive session. Please be a friend of the show. Interact with us as much as you want. There's nothing off limits. Let's have fun. But today, we are going to be talking all things storylines, all things training camp for these Los Angeles Chargers. And we have a giveaway. Eat, slay, repeat. Keenan Allen clock. Man, Jamie Messina has some gems that he has sold. And this is coming straight from the Bolt fam himself. We will announce the winner of that at the end of this broadcast. So this is the first time, Jake, we have done any sort of live thing for Chargers Unleashed. So we apologize in advance if any of this screws up. But until then, Jake.
Let's talk football.
Let's talk some football. We get to see Paz tomorrow. Baby. How you feeling?
Man, I'm feeling great, man. Again, we've been talking about all of these position groups over the last several weeks, what to be watching for, who could be certain undrafted free agents that can compete for certain spots. I'm sick of talking about it, though, man. I'm ready to see it. We've gotten all of these indications from everything we've read, from the guests that we've had on this show, for things that they expect, from players that we had on this show for what they expect. I'm just ready to see it in its full form. And like you mentioned just a minute ago, the biggest aspect here is you get to see this new coaching staff take the reins of this team and really see how they conduct their practices. And if minicamp and OTAs with Coach Staley running dual fields with basically getting all of the players as many reps as possible, if that's any early indication of what we're going to get, I can't wait to see what this is going to look like. But it's not minicamp, it's not OTAs, it's not just shirt and basketball shorts out there. we're running actual drills, people. This is I'm ready to see something, damn it.
It has been so long. It feels like it has been, we said it a million times, it has been 84 years, Jake, until we've seen live football. And this offseason has been absolutely insane. And so many things have gone the Chargers' way, from the draft picks to free agency to mini camps to people signing to literally today when the last two of our draft picks left unsigned, signed the dotted line. This has been a whirlwind of an offseason. And there are so many storylines going into this that, like, where do we even start? Like, if you were to look at just like offseason or just training camp storylines, 5,000 foot view, what would you say is the biggest storyline? And Jake, this is a question for you, but also for the listeners out there. What is the biggest storyline? Be sure to comment in the thread. Let us know what you think. But to you, Jake, biggest storyline, 5,000 foot view. What is it?
I mean, I feel like I'd just be grasping at the obvious straw here. It's just the return of Derwin James. I mean, this is something that everybody is looking forward to. He even said it today when he arrived at camp. He said, "I know you all been waiting for me. We're back. We're back." I mean, he knows it. So, I mean, I've said this on this podcast multiple times. Who are you most looking forward to seeing in the 2021 season, and why is it Derwin James? That's the biggest storyline, because we've seen for 2 straight years what this defense is like when he's not part of it, when he's not out on the field. And to get the pairing of not only him back, but to see the combination that we've been waiting for with him and Nasir Adderley, that we've heard from Daniel Jeremiah when he was drafted, that it was the perfect complement to the way that Derwin James' play style, basically just the perfect dynamic duo, if you will, for a safety position. So there's no question that all eyes are going to be on Derwin James tomorrow. Dan, your favorite storyline going into tomorrow?
There's a lot. Quick shout out, Steve Haglund, fam. What up, family? Also, Dark Band.
Haglund's on here?
What up, on man? Here. We got comments. What up, family? With the hand emojis. Holla.
What's happening, man?
Grizz_James. Yes, sir. Let's go. Bolt up, baby. I agree. How many folks out there are actually going to be going to training camp this season?
Apparently there's going to be a lot. I've been seeing everything from Twitter this week. I know Haglund's going. I know Tyler's going. I know a lot of representatives from the Bolt family are going. As I mentioned, our LAFB family will be out there. But I've seen a lot of fans that have been talking about whether it's tomorrow, whether it's this week. I know for FanFest is going to be absolutely insane. It's hype time, baby. It's hype time.
Yep. No, so little birdie Jake tells me that tomorrow, Wednesday's training camp is absolutely sold out, and they may actually have to be turning people away. So for folks who are looking to get to training camp tomorrow, be sure to get there early. Sneak peek, little secret, gates open at 8 o'clock, even though it starts at 9. Gates open at 8. Get there early. Don't be the one who has to get turned down because you got there super late. My biggest storyline, and I'm one of the lucky ones that actually get to go to training camp tomorrow, the first one that we get to see live with Brandon Staley, with Justin Herbert. And honestly, I think one of the things that I'm most looking forward to is just seeing the impact of this new coaching staff, and specifically like what that translates to on the field during training camp. We've seen for years, like the Anthony Lynn-led training camps, and we've seen the results of them, and we've seen kind of the tail of the tape of what has been gotten from those. Brandon Staley has brought in so much to this squad, both on the field in terms of like personnel, in terms of like play scheme, the coaching staff that he brought in, the mentality, the hashtag our way of doing things. There's just rejuvenation that I think this team hasn't had in quite some time. And yes, there's excitement that we get to see Derwin James, and there's excitement we get to see Drew Tranquil. We get to see all these players, Rashawn Slater now, Corey Linsley, like Justin Herbert, you name it. We can go down the list, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I just want to see how this team is reflected of its coach. Because if this team is anything like its coach, that means it's going to be prepared. That means it's going to be smart. That means it's going to be ahead of the game. And it means that we're going to be ready to win. and have an advantage that I don't think Chargers fans have been used to thinking about in 15, 20 years? Like, when's the last time you were excited to go into a season thinking you had the competitive advantage from the coaching scheme? Like, literally.
I mean, I can't remember anybody saying it during the Norv Turner era, even though that was like the last remnants of overall a solid team that the Chargers had. Maybe you felt it a little bit when Norv left, given the perception of him during that point in time. Then you had Mike McCoy coming in, but then of course we realized very quickly that it wasn't that type of mentality that he had at the Rams. And then again, initially at the beginning with Anthony Lynn when he came, we thought it was just going to be another completely different mentality. And then what we've learned, especially last year, it didn't end up being the right fit. So it's always nice when you get the nice new shiny toy, whether it's a coach or a player. But just everything that you've heard Brandon Staley demonstrate, what he said thus far up until this point, it just sounds different. It feels different. It like I said, I still believe that Brandon Staley has the capability of selling car insurance to a giraffe. I stand by that wholeheartedly, 100%. I still believe that he can do it.
Oh, that's one of my favorite lines you've given on the entire show.
Whatever he's selling, I'm buying it. I believe it. And I cannot wait to see him execute his plans that he has for this team.
Now, another friend of the show, Tyler Lawrence, a.k.a. the Master Bolt, gives us a quick shout out, says, "What's up, guys?" And I think he was disagreeing to you, and it looks like he's agreeing with me. It's got to be the new coaching staff and how it affects the whole team next season. New playbook, new schemes, analytics-driven team. I mean, has this Chargers team ever talked about analytics as like its driving force?
No, and now we're hiring analytics people out there. I mean, it's just
so weird.
This is one of the million reasons why, because it's a great point by Tyler there, just as far as why it feels different. There was a different approach that it felt like, even going all the way back to before Brandon Staley was even hired, when we threw out the names like Brian Daboll into this conversation, and some people were thinking like, okay, well, this is going to be the traditional type of Spanos hire, or you look at any of the other candidates that we had out there. Not to say that they necessarily wouldn't have panned out, because we haven't even seen anything like this yet, but doing the same things over and over and over and over again. Just someone that doesn't bring a different type of mentality, creativity to adapt to the way that the game is played today. And as Tyler said there, that's just one of the million reasons that this feels different, because everything from the point of Brandon Staley getting hired to the coaching staff that he ended up putting behind him, and everything that's happened thus far, it just has that different type of feel, which is why we're hyped up, which is why we're excited, and which is why we're buying into all this. So yes, is there a reason to be excited? Absolutely.
Now, it's kind of interesting. Now Will Schupa, Jake, I don't know if you see this on the screen. Will Schupa has said, same old Chargers since the Ice Bowl versus the Bengals. Dan Fouts, Rivers, now Herbie. And then furthermore, he talks about like specifically Dan Fouts, Lance Allworth, Winslow, Charlie Davis, kind of going to the whole, I mean, back then, Air Coryell, I mean, it was beautiful. What's similar, and I don't know where Will Schupa is going with this, but I think the question I have on this topic is, going into training camp, Dan Fouts, Lance Allworth, Winslow, Charlie Davis. Dan Fouts, obviously, I think if you were to kind of give a similarity, it would be Justin Herbert. Lance Allworth, Keenan Allen, obviously. Winslow, we don't really know. I think that's kind of like tight end by committee, would you think? Like, who would be your Lance Allworth, or your Kellen Winslow, other than all of them?
I don't know. I kind of don't really understand. I mean, if the question is basically saying that it's the same old Chargers that we're going to underachieve again, I mean, hey, up until this point, I have no argument with it. They've underachieved with better teams, in my opinion, than that. Go back to the 14-2. That's all you need to know. And from there, it just slowly fizzled out. So if that's the point of the question, then yes, up until this point, you can say that right now. But the expectations now are much greater than I think than what they were before. Because back in the days of Dan Fouts and that Air Coryell offense, Chargers could throw up 45 points a game if they wanted to, but damn it, they couldn't stop anybody from putting up 46. So that's just what happened.
Now, one of the things that I find kind of interesting, and Blake talks about this with excitement of the coaching staff and seeing what he does with Derwin James, which we'll get into impact of coaching with players in a sec. But one of the things that Will also brought up in a comment, which I will showcase here if I can get it, is he brings up the point. We had successful coaches in the past who have gone 14-2 and then get fired once they get bounced out of the playoffs. Now, what is your barometer, Jake, for like what you're expecting from this coaching staff? And I guess more specifically, like what does success look like to you? If the Chargers do blank this season, that is a success. Like what would that be to you?
I mean, first step, one thing I'd say that they'd have to do is obviously make the playoffs. And you're in a tough enough division and a tough enough conference to do so. And the first 6 games of your schedule, we've gone over this, Dan, is actually a pretty tough stretch to go through on that. And now you add in an extra week of the season, which actually betters your odds a little bit. But making the playoffs, number one, if this team can get – I know that I may sound like I'm undercutting here, but it's because we don't necessarily know with Brandon Staley and this coaching staff yet what we're going to see. And you have Justin Herbert in year 2. And I know given what he did having the rookie of the year season, the expectations for him are much higher this year, when last year we didn't expect anything of him. And nobody saw that coming from what he ended up with the show that he ended up putting up in 2020. So the expectations down for him for his next year are going to be sky high. You get a full season of training camp with all of these guys back in their usual type of camp environment. I think it's going to be a betterment for the entire team. It's just, you really don't know how this coaching staff what they're all about yet. If this was Anthony Lynn's team still, it would be easier to set forth what your expectations were, because we had a good idea as far as either how he ran his defense or Gus Bradley ran his defense. Sure. And XYZ would need to happen in order for us to be successful. We know what we'd be saying right now. It's like, well, hey, how about run better 2-minute situational football drills? How about that for one? Eliminate the penalties. Stop running zone defense. The list can go on and on and on. This answer would be much easier if this is last year's coaching regime. But this is the big anomaly. So I think the easiest thing that I could say right now is make the playoffs. Make the playoffs. I don't care whether it's a wild card or not. You don't necessarily have to win the division. That's going to be a stretch within itself, given who you have to go against in Kansas City. Just get to the playoffs. For me, for this year right now, I'll be happy with it. If they could exceed that, even better.
Do you think this fan base would accept that as a success? Let's say we make it to the wild card round, get bounced. Do you see there being like, oh, Brandon Staley needs to go?
No, nothing like that. I mean, we were just back in the playoffs, 3 years ago in 2018, when we actually put up a halfway decent season.
We would have freaking beat New England if we had a linebacker.
Hey, what are you going to do? But, you got past Baltimore in the first round that year. And again, it's just the expectation aspect. I know, especially with that team, what is it that we hate, Dan? On paper, that philosophy. Ugh. It feels like every season for the last better part of 15 years since the Chargers had a 14-2 team, we've always been saying this team can be this, but ultimately they end up falling short of expectations. And for a myriad of different reasons, whether it's coaching, whether it's injuries, whether it's you name it, it seems like we have fallen short of expectations for the better part of almost the last 20 years, 15 years, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't think that it's going to be that type of a clamoring factor if we end up getting bounced in the playoffs. You have to understand the situation here is that while Justin Herbert put up an amazing first season as a rookie, he still is young. And I'm not saying that that he's going to regress in any type of way, but hey, Justin Herbert would be getting to his first playoff game in the NFL, and that's a whole different animal, as everybody knows, in the regular season. Even for veterans, it is. So again, I put my ceiling right now is make the playoffs, get in as a wild card, and to me, you could still be dangerous from there. Brandon Staley has playoff coaching experience. I would love to see what he would do as the head coach of this team in a playoff scenario.
I agree. It's something special to watch. We have tons of comments and or questions coming in, so keep them flowing, guys. We'll try to get to them as we go through this episode live stream. Again, thank you for your patience as we push through our first attempt. This is actually super fun, Jake. I kind of like this on the fly, just like rapid fire questions. This is good. So it looks like Will Schupa might be more on the pessimist viewpoint, as Jake often is.
Hey, it falls right in line with me, man.
But also, one could say pessimist, one could say realist, depending on who you ask. Why is Brandon Staley not Mike Riley 2.0?
Well, let's see. Mike Riley, coach of the Chargers from 1999 to 2001. If there's one good thing that came out of Mike Riley coaching this team, it was the fact that the team finished 1-15, had the first overall pick in 2000, and we all know what ended up coming from that. That may be the best contribution that Mike Riley had to this team. But I mean, come on, the best season that Mike Riley had was getting this team to 500 and 8-8. I mean, if we could come close to doing it last year at 7-9 with an Anthony Lynn team, I mean, hey, it's year one, but I have to think that we could do a little bit better than that.
Now, there's a couple storylines that I think I kind of had on the tip of my tongue as we were kind of getting ready for this. And one of the ones that you and I have talked a bit at length in previous episodes, I know we talked to Chris Harry about this. We've talked to several of the Chargers players about how excited they are to kind of work with Brandon Staley. And there's a few comments in here, and I'll bring them up. But which players do you feel will be impacted most positively by this coaching scheme? Like going from last year to this year, either with an NFL season or as a rookie, whatever. But who do you think will benefit the most from this coaching staff specifically?
Ooh, it's a good question. Just off the top of my head, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think two guys come to mind, and that's Uchenna Nwosu and Jerry Tillery. And for two very different reasons. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Uchenna Nwosu last year, given Melvin Ingram's injury status, was severely underutilized last year. And for a guy who you invested a second-round pick in a couple years back, unfortunately has not given a fair chance. He has his clear shot to be the next guy across from Joey Bosa right now, but be the guy that we've been waiting to see for these past several years since the Chargers drafted him in the second round. I think he's going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of Coach Staley coming here. You look at the defensive players that Staley has coached up in the past, and especially when you look at last year's team with the Rams and the talent that they had on their front line. Definitely, I think that he is going to benefit from this already from what he's grown in the past couple of years. And now you add in this coaching scheme along with Staley and Ronaldo Hill. I think that's one that should be an easy target. And for Jerry Tillery, I know for a lot of people are done with Jerry Tillery. And look, I can understand why. Already people want to say that he's written off as a bust. This is a critical year for him. This is indeed the make or break year for him.
Talk about it.
I think that now with the Chargers moving back into this defensive scheme, and again, with Staley at the helm, we always knew from when Tillery was drafted that stopping the run was not his bread and butter. It was always being able to rush the quarterback, get to the quarterback. That was his thing. That was what he was known for. It wasn't so much his ability to stop the run. So I think now you put him more on the inside, as I know that he was used a little bit more on the defensive end as an outside pass rusher sometimes with Gus Bradley's scheme last year, but you use him more in his natural state. And again, we talked about this. You get to have front three that's going to have Justin Jones, Linval Joseph, and Jerry Tillery next to each other. I mean, that's just bonkers to me when you think about the size and the girth of these guys and how talented these guys are. Linval Joseph, I've said a couple weeks back, was one of the most underrated.
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and GapFactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
Chargers on this team last year. The stats didn't, create fireworks. It wasn't anything that was off the chart. But for Linval Joseph and his consistency, what he did for this defense was one of the bright spots, no doubt about it. I think that Jerry will learn a lot with another year, again, in full camp now. I still think he'll learn a lot from Linval Joseph, and most importantly from this coaching staff. I think that they'll put him back in his natural position. I think that he'll be better. I think he'll be better at stopping the run, believe it or not, but I think he's going to be able to get back to what he was doing best at Notre Dame and get some interior pressure on the quarterback. It's been a long time since this Chargers defensive front was able to get interior pressure, not just off the edge. I'm talking interior pass rush. And that's evidenced with another guy named Justin Jones, who still up to this point only has 1 sack for his career. So
it's crazy.
There definitely needs to be more pressure from the interior defensive linemen in order for this team to be successful, especially in the trenches.
And I do think that is something that I'm excited to see is what our defensive front is going to look like with Brandon Staley. Because if you look at his past, which sidebar, Jake, do you think there is a coach out there right now that has played with as many elite defenders as Brandon Staley? I mean, think about this. He's gone from like Khalil Mack, then like Von Miller. Then he went, obviously last year, Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, now Derwin James, Joey Bosa. Like, I'm just trying to think of a coach that has played with that many elite, talented players his entire coaching staff.
And it's not just that, Dan. I mean, yeah, you can talk about all the big name players there, and it's notable, which gives us good hope for our big name players. But now look at the guys that he's also developed while he's been there.
Very good point.
Look at who was it? John Johnson. Look at Troy Hill from last year. Again, Jalen Ramsey was the only first round pick out of that secondary. Everybody else, I believe, was either third round and lower. And that secondary, again, was part of one of the best defense in the NFL last year. I think that Staley's development capabilities is going to do wonders for some of the guys that we have felt maybe to this point should have been performing already at a higher level. So I think that when you look at those facts, I think that there's reason for hope with guys that are outside of the big names on this team.
There's a few guys on this team that I cannot wait to see kind of be, no pun intended here, unleashed. Nazir wow. Adderley. I know. I was waiting for that all night. Nazir Adderley. I know some folks are already kind of turned on him, and I think they are going to be shocked and proven wrong this year when they see what he can do in the right scheme that showcases his ability. I think Kenneth Murray is going to look like a completely different player this year. Cannot wait to see what he looks like. I agree with you on Uchenna Nwosu. He is kind of a potential breakout candidate this year for the Chargers, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he had 10 sacks. Not at all. I really am fascinated to see what Jerry Tillery looks like this year because he has that freak athletic traits. Like he's super fast. He's a giant man. And if you look back at the last year, especially last year, he was like a hair away from several sacks and just let guys get away from his grasp. And he just couldn't finish. And I think that kind of goes back to like the little things that Brandon Staley talks about. And you heard Drew Tranquil talk about it on one of our previous episodes. If you haven't seen that episode, he was fantastic on Chargers Unleashed. Go check it out. But he had talked about like before they even got to even touch a football, the coaching staff was teaching fundamentals with this team for like a week. And like the team was going stir crazy. Everybody just wanted to go play football. But like he was not letting them get into any of that until they got into the specifics and like the very, very minute details and fundamentals of football. So Jerry Tillery has an opportunity to really, really improve this year. And I think of all of the players on defense, because we haven't talked offense yet, but all the players on defense, I think the players that have the most ceiling, or I guess the most variance for improvement last year to this year, I would say it's either going to be Jerry Tillery, Uchenna Nwosu, or Nazir Adderley. I can see all three of them being night and day players this year than last.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off your points there, Dan, because all of that, I love how you brought up the Drew Tranquil and you're talking about the player's perspective of why it just feels different. Again, I go back to the one thing that we heard consistently, whether it was from Drew Tranquil, whether it was from Chris Harris, whether it was from Nasir Adderley, that concept of being able to play more free, as they called it. I want to see what this looks like. I want to see this materialize. I want to see what it is that they're talking about in action on the field. I can't wait to see this, because it just sounds like you have certain players that just have collective freedom to play the way that they want to play, to play the way that they know is best for them. And if there's one thing that we have learned from Brandon Staley in this offense, is that he hones in very well on relating to his players and putting them in the best position that they know that they can see. But even on a personal level, just relating to them. So it just shows you another example of a coach that's actually listening and wanting to get the best out of all of his players. So just to touch on your point there, it's something to pay attention to.
I can't wait. It's funny. There are so many storylines. We could talk about players. Seeing, I think, like one of the biggest differences we're going to see year over year, and I think the entire NFL, is going to be the 2020 Los Angeles Chargers defense and the scheme that was versus the 2021 Los Angeles Chargers defense. And weirdly, people sleep on it, but like we give Gus Bradley a lot of flack, and Chris Harry talked about it on a previous episode where he said like he let players play free too. But like when you lose a guy like Derwin James that soon before the season starts, like there's only so much you can do. But statistically, like this defense, I believe, was a top 10 defense in many categories. But like your eyeballs when you're watching the game, you're like, that's not a good, it doesn't work.
No.
This defense has an opportunity to be special. And Will Schupa, now optimist. So we're going on the optimism side here. Our secondary is going to be top 15 at the very least. What is the ceiling and floor, would you say?
I'd say that's a fair ceiling. I'd say that's a good shot right there. I think that that should definitely be the case. Again, I think that this secondary is definitely going to be more aggressive. When you add a chess piece in, an irreplaceable piece like Derwin James, and getting him back, and we haven't seen him really as his full self in the last 2 years. Again, he came back for, I think it was 5 games in 2019, but just he was still recovering off the injury. He wasn't the DJ that we knew in 2018 when he put up that massive rookie season. But when you take a piece like that and you insert him back, and you have talent now of Nasir Adderley, when you have Michael Davis, who's still growing to be a very reliable corner, and now you add in the likes of Asante Samuel Jr. for that secondary. And I know there are other pieces here that we're talking about, even from a depth standpoint, but just looking at your starting layout from secondary, there is an immense amount of talent that is on this team that has come into it. So I don't think it's a long shot at all to say that we'll find out that the difference between last year's defense and this year's defense, there won't be anything close. This year's defense, I think, will surpass it dramatically and very quickly.
Jake, it is Tuesday, July 27th. Rashawn Slater and Asante Samuel Jr. are both Los Angeles Chargers, and all 9 Los Angeles Chargers draft picks are now officially signed. I mean, could this coaching staff could they have hit a larger home run in the first 2 picks than those 2? And to have Rashawn Slater's contract fully guaranteed, I mean, talk about just backing up the Brinks truck. You think they know they got a good one there. The coaching staff hit it out of the park, and I can't wait to see what some of these rookies look like at training camp. Like we've seen Rashawn Slater, even though he didn't have his contract, he was out there working like he was already signed. He talked to us on one of our previous episodes. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Rashawn Slater talked about it. He wanted to get it signed as soon as possible. He's ready to go to work. You see Asante Samuel Jr., all the tapes that he's got. I mean, he just he's ready to ball out. Like he is all business on that football field. Mark Webb, I can't wait to see what he brings. Trey McKitty, I think he's got a ton of potential. Chris Rumpf, like there's so many guys that this team has acquired that you kind of take it for granted. And like, I don't know about you, Jake, but like when you think about it, like everyone's super excited for training camp, right? And you're thinking about like, oh, we can go to the Super Bowl, and everybody gets all excited and everybody's all positive, but like I can't think, and I know I'm generally the optimist, but like I can't think of another year when the Chargers Chargers fans have had this much genuine reason for excitement. Like they have a former Rookie of the Year quarterback, new coaching staff. They got literally their best wishes of the first 2-round draft picks. They get the best player on defense, arguably, in Derwin James, back healthy, along with a Drew Tranquil. They completely revamped their offensive line. Folks are like, there are so many storylines that this team is night and day. And so if there are Charger fans out there that are not excited, like what are you watching? Like what else could they have done to be any better prepared than they are right now? And people will say they could have spent more money, and they could, like, money doesn't grow on trees, man. Like, it doesn't work that way. Jake, you've told me that several times. And they are in a great position for signing folks next year, which we'll get into in other episodes. But like, this is damn exciting. Like, I honestly can't remember the last time there has been a legit reason for optimism across the fan base.
Yeah, it's tough to think of any other time given what you just said, because, again, it's not just the draft picks, it's not just the free agency. I think it's just this overall feeling of just change and doing the things that that we as fans could look at and say, well, that needs to be the number one priority. And then they actually did it. I mean, how many of us were clamoring for Corey Linsley to be a Charger before free agency hit? And then it happened. And not only that,
fat chance, they're not going to pay that. No way.
And they ponied up and they gave him the coin, and he is now your new starting center. For me, I think the thing that probably surprised me the most, outside of the Chargers actually landing Rashawn Slater and Asante Samuel Jr., was I actually did not expect 4/5 of this offensive line to be in complete turnover. I expected it to be 3 at most. You kept 2, you could possibly keep 2 from last year. I didn't expect that much of an overhaul. But it goes to show when you see an investment the way that Justin Herbert bowled out last year and the numbers that he put up, doing that behind one of the worst offensive lines in the league. Think about what could potentially happen if you just give him a top 15 offensive line in the league. I mean, you don't even have to go to a top offensive line. Just give me a top 15 performing offensive line. Think about what the expectations of what it could possibly be for Justin if you give him a little bit more protection. You don't believe that? Go ask the Cincinnati Bengals, who still did not put in the adequate investment to protect their quarterback in Joe Burrow.
Shout out.
You saw what happened to Patrick Mahomes when you saw what happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl when he did not have his 2 starting tackles in that game. Tampa Bay just teed off. So for Justin Herbert to do what he did as a rookie in that situation, I mean, you can't say it enough times. It was just flat out amazing. So I think that was probably the biggest surprise for me, because the Chargers historically have not properly invested in their offensive line. Go back to Phillip Rivers. How many years would he have loved to see what they did for this offensive line this year? Any other year, going all the way back past 2008, maybe, when you had the likes of, Nick Hardwick and Chris Dealman still on this offensive line. He's probably been clamoring for moves like this since then. And it's just a fortunate situation that, of course, right when Rivers leaves is when the investment in the offensive line starts to properly come into play. So I think that was yeah, that was one of the probably the biggest thing that surprised me is they actually did what we've been wanting them to do for years, and it was a pleasant surprise.
We are talking all things Los Angeles Chargers training camp. We are going live tomorrow. Chargers actually get to be in pads. We're going over storylines. If you have a question or a topic you'd like us to discuss, leave a message, leave a comment in any of the ways that you are actually streaming us, because we'll look at it and hopefully see it. If not, we apologize. This is our first time doing it. Jake, this episode is brought to the good people by Brewery X. You can see the X on the hat. For folks who have not been up to Anaheim, be sure to check them out. They have tremendous libations. You can do seltzers, you can do beers. They also have amazing food there, actually. Their pizzas are amazing. Jake, I was fortunate enough to be with you and our founder, Ryan Dyrud. We got to go check out Matt Money Smith and Petros and Money. I also got to see a live show. That was fun. Got to hang out with them for a bit. Highly recommend Brewery X. Slap and Tickle, I know, is your favorite. I love Dictionary Roulette. They have an amazing jungle juice. I could definitely go for one of those. I think about this coaching staff sometimes, Jake, and there's been a lot of times where we look at the team and we say, like, this team has won in spite of the coaching staff, or this team has won in spite of the line that this coaching staff has brought in, or Tom Telesco hasn't done his job, and all that kind of stuff. And you talked about it. I think it was when we were talking to the folks over at Locked On Chargers, and I forget exactly. I'm going to butcher this, but I think it said something along the lines of, like, I have never hoped for mediocrity as much as I had for this offensive line. Just give me mediocre, okay offensive line play, and this coaching staff, and, like, we're good. Like, if we were bad last year, and if we could just get to mediocre, like, just be okay, that's a win.
Yeah, I actually said it for the special teams, but I mean, I get where you're going with this, because I mean, special teams, I mean, the truth is you can't get any worse than where you were at last year. So if you could tell me that you could take me from rock bottom to mediocrity in special teams in a single year, I'll take that. I've never wanted to celebrate mediocrity more if that's what we got. Rather than just a special teams unit, if we're talking about the kickers, yes, Michael Badgley missed 12 kicks last year. In my own words, he was no longer the money badger. He just flat out went bankrupt.
How do you spell that?
Shut up. Just bring me to mediocrity when it comes to special teams. I'll take that as a win, because you can't get any lower than what you got. And Darius Swinton, aside from Brandon Staley, quickly became my new favorite coach on this team. I love his attitude. I love his approach. If you can't get hyped up as a player to play for this guy, then the only other person I could ever picture anybody getting hyped up to play for with just the way that he coached is Mike Westhoff. And Mike Westhoff is historically one of the best special teams coaches that has been historically in the game. But if you can't get hyped up to play for Darius Swinton after hearing the comments that he's made, I don't know what to do at this point. I don't know what to do.
We are going to be going through all kinds of rapid fire storylines. We got training camp starting tomorrow. And yes, Bolt Up 2000. There are going to be several of us from the LAFB Network at training camp, all throughout training camp, starting tomorrow. Folks who are there, if we see you there, please say hello, stop by. What else, Jake? What are you most concerned about in terms of storylines? We're not going to use the 5-letter word. We're not going to go into that. But, like, other than that, like what are you hoping to see or hoping for improvements on as training camp proceeds? Like, I've got a couple, but I'm curious which one comes to mind first for you.
Well, I know what 5-letter word you're talking about, but I'll choose a different 5-letter word. How about depth? there is depth on this roster that still concerns me. The interior defensive line depth is still a concern for me, past the 3 starters that we'll have in that role. The depth at safety. And there was people who, during our safety breakdown, that said for us to talk about concerns in the safety position for this year was, I'll just say, irresponsible for the better part of this show. I don't see how that is when you haven't had your best player, who just so happens to be a safety, for the past 2 years. And this safety unit can still use a lot of work, and especially when it comes to depth. There's a lot of question marks when you look at Alohi Gilman and now Mark Webb. They may be thrust with enormous possibilities if another knock on wood 5-letter word ends up happening. So depth-wise, that's another area where I'm concerned. Those would be the ones that would really stick out for me. You look at all the other aspects of this roster, even on the offensive side of the ball, the Chargers are really stacked at their skill positions, whether you're talking about wide receiver, even tight end now, even with the acquisition of Jared Cook, and you saw what Donald Parham did and the potential for him. You draft Trey McKitty and you bring back one of my favorite players of this team, Steven Anderson. There is a lot of depth at the skill positions for this team on the offensive side of the ball, but you start looking through, and there are some question marks beyond the starters at certain positions for this team. So I would definitely say depth would be my biggest concern. I think that the Chargers would still need to make 1, maybe 2 more acquisitions at either one of those positions, and who knows what's going to happen as training camps come along and we get closer to the beginning of the regular season. And it happens every year that there's always surprise cuts, so you'll never know what veteran may come on the market.
Depth. Now, you said something that made my ears perk up a little bit. You said that this team is stacked at wide receiver and tight end. Expand on that. What do you mean by stacked? Because I think a lot of people confuse like depth with top end talent. So what do you mean by stacked?
Okay, that's a fair question. So let me specify with what I mean with stacked. We said it during our wide receiver episode that you have a logjam essentially of 6 to 7 wide receivers, talented. Well, hang on a second, 6 to 7 wide receivers, with 4 or 5 of them being very, very talented players for this roster. And when you have a competition that's going to be the way it is, for guys vying for, let's just say, the top 6 wide receiver spots, when you go off the names of the list, when you're talking about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Tyron Johnson, Jalen Guyton, and then you still have to see who dukes it out between Joe Reed and KJ Hill, 2 guys who we thought were going to battle it out for the wide receiver position, and now one of those guys could be on the outside looking in. That's not a bad problem to have when you see the way that let's just say 4 out of those first 5 guys performed last year. That's not a bad problem to have when it comes to depth. And at the wide receiver position, you saw it last year. Justin Herbert wasn't necessarily playing favorites. And when you have that many weapons that you can build upon, that's a great problem to have. With the tight end position, with Jared Cook coming in, I think Joe Lombardi is going to he knows exactly what Jared Cook is all about, what he thrives in. Jared Cook last year had 7 touchdowns for the New Orleans Saints. He knows Joe Lombardi's familiar with him. I think he's going to get him involved in this offense the best way that he knows how. Donald Parham is the guy that we're all kind of keeping our eyes on because we love what we saw from him towards the end of the season. Huge upside from an athletic standpoint, from a talent standpoint. It just seemed like right now it's just waiting to be uncorked, and it's tapped right now. And can he take that next step in being the next tight end of this team beyond what this year holds for Jared Cook? Because likely this is a 1-year deal. I don't see it going past that. Can Donald Parham eventually grow into the tight end that we're hoping he can be? And then you have Trey McKitty, who I think is one of the more under the radar draft picks. Now, I know when he was first selected that a lot of people had question marks about him being the ultimate choice, but you look at everything now, and with the talent that the Chargers already have, and with what Trey McKitty brings to the table, again, more potential that's untapped from him. If there was better quarterback play with Trey McKitty where he played, it could have been a different story. If he wasn't solely just made to be a blocker and actually given a chance to catch some balls, you saw what he did during Senior Bowl week, he could be very beneficial. But he was one of the last true blocking tight ends that was still available on the board when the Chargers selected him. So he's going to fill very crucial role for this team because
Spring it on with 40 to 70% off almost everything at Gap Factory and GapFactory.com. Matching styles for the family are on sale too. Shop it all through April 12th.
The Chargers just historically have not had a lot of good blocking tight ends. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do. And especially when it comes to the run game, Trey McKitty can be a huge asset to that. And then Steven Anderson. I just love Steven Anderson. I love what he did last year toward the end of the year. I think that he is a great weapon if you put him out in space. And yes, even as a blocker, I think as an all-around tight end, I think Steven Anderson can do it all. If he got the right opportunity, and I know that he will for some team, but I hope that he sticks with this roster for the 2021 season, Steven Anderson could be just a great asset to this team in more ways than one that I don't think a lot of people are really taking a look at.
It's true. And I agree with you. I typically, and this has kind of been the curse of the Chargers, is you look at the depth, right? And we'll have top-end talent. Derwin James, incredible. But the drop-off from that top end to the depth pieces is so drastic that, like, the team just crumbles. And so when you talk about, like, those positions being stacked, I think that's what I like about it is, yes, there's going to be a drop-off from a Keenan Allen to anyone else on your team. But, but you should have serviceable guys back there still. So we're going to get into the Q&A here. If folks have questions for us, please send them in through the comments, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Twitter, on Facebook. We see you or all of those. So check us out, LAFB shout out. So submit your questions. We'd love to answer them. But in the meantime, like, I wonder, like, so for myself, for example, I'm going to be going to Chargers training camp. I'm actually going to be comparing that. I'm actually going to be going to a few Rams training camps as well. Well, at least I'm going to one. And I'm curious to see, because I bet you there's going to be more similarities than differences, knowing like Sean McVay and a Brandon Staley. Like, there's probably going to be a lot of similarities with how those things are run in terms of innovation and communication and kind of just like going beyond just typical leadership. Like, there's a leadership quality that Brandon Staley and Sean McVay have that not only is it connecting to players, but it also like gets more out of them and it makes them smarter players in the meantime. I think looking at this training camp, we haven't even really talked about the offense. We've talked about like the defense, talked about the offensive line for a bit, which like I still cannot believe, like you said, I cannot believe that we have an offensive line. Again, we'll use the term on paper, but there's no way the line could be worse than last year. So the fact that they did something, sweet. I'm really curious to see what like a Joe Lombardi-led offense looks like. We know what was back in Detroit. We've talked about the mistakes and things he's learned from that. We've seen how amazing Drew Brees has been both in San Diego as well as obviously in New Orleans under Joe Lombardi. I'm curious to kind of see what that looks like and what they are crafting for Justin Herbert. So I think we're going to find out pretty quickly like what this offense is going to look like under this new coaching scheme. And going into training camp, like I think there's going to be a lot of questions answered pretty quickly around like what does this look like? Because like we heard people talk about like, oh, Mike Williams is going to be the Michael Thomas role, which like cool. I mean, if he gets 1,500 yards and 100 and something catches, like, awesome. Color me wrong. But, like, I just don't know how that's going to happen when you have a guy like Keenan Allen. The running game, like, there's so many unknowns. But we can tell you that the running game was not good last year. I think it was, 3.9 yards per carry, if I remember right. Like, that has to get better. And thank you, Rashawn Slater. You should be helping us with that. Like, there's so many intricacies, there's so many wrinkles, there's so many improvements that, like, we've talked about, that you kind of lose sight at just like the gravity of how much has changed. And so, there's all this off-season excitement, and there's all this talk, and there's all of these drafts and free agencies, but like, you just forget how many there were. I don't understand how folks can still be pessimistic or low on this Chargers team, given how many things that they have improved. And I think that's what I'm excited for with training camp, specifically starting tomorrow, 9 a.m., Jack Hammett, is just to kind of see like a refreshed, rejuvenated team dynamic. Like, it just felt tired last year. And everyone was, the people covering the team, the players, Anthony Lynn grew more gray hair than I did. And like, that's saying something. The team just needed like a jump start. And I feel like it has it. And even just watching all the players like come into training camp today, you saw the videos like Keenan Allen coming in, you saw Derwin James all excited. You saw, everyone. It's just like, sure, everyone's excited coming into training camp, but this just feels different. Question came through, Jake. Actually, it's not really a question. Herbert Hype Train, I think he is expecting positive things. Chargers should get 12 wins. That would put them at, 12-5?
12-5 this year with the addition of the 17th week in the season.
If the Chargers get 12 wins, Jake will be blank.
I'll be happy. That definitely guarantees you a playoff spot. I think for them, you look at the first 6 weeks of this game, or this team has on their schedule. Oof. You're going up against arguably the number one defense in the league in the Washington Redskins. Yes, I understand who's playing on offense. If Ryan Fitzmagic, if he can be that guy, there are some offensive pieces that can absolutely destroy this team if need be. And when you have a defense like that, that's going to be a tougher game than I think most expect. You get the Dallas Cowboys, you get their quarterback back, you know what their offense is about. Their defense, it's going to be hard for that defense to get any worse than they got. I think their defense is going to be more improved. Then you play the Chiefs in week 3. We already know what type of barn burner that's going to be. That's no guarantee. You play the Raiders, that should be a victory. The Browns, this as they say, this isn't your daddy's Browns anymore. There are people that are legitimately picking the Browns to go to the Super Bowl this year, and for good reason, because of what Kevin Stefanski has turned that team into, and especially with that running game. And then right after that, you get the Ravens, and then you get the Patriots. Say what you will, they're not the same old Patriots because Tom Brady's not on the team. Well, hey, that didn't matter last year when Bill Belichick was still coaching this team. Oof. So I would love to see 12 wins. Long story short, I would love to see 12 wins. But I definitely think it's going to be a hard road to get there. Not dismissing it. Love the optimism. Would love to see it. I'll say more realistically is probably looking at 10-7 base case scenario, but that should still earn you a playoff spot with this extra week.
Got it. All right, we got another one coming in. I'm going to butcher this name, but SH3RD, which I think that's Sherd74. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jake, if the Chargers go 0-3 the preseason and then start the regular season 0-3, should we be nervous?
It's what's the one thing that we know? And Dan, you talk about why. I'm gonna defend the pessimist here for a second, because you said I don't understand why people are not hyped up for this team. It's easy to be hyped with everything that we've talked about on this show, with everything that we're seeing in the headlines. But the one thing that we always say, Dan, we hate the line on paper. And there are those individuals that believe that the Chargers live up to that terrible saying more than any other team in the league. And historically, what is one thing that we've seen, no matter who the coach is over these last several years? The Chargers start slow. So to the pessimist defense, yeah, they have a reason to, until they see different, until proven different, history is on the side of those facts. So to the question, if the Chargers go 0-3 in the preseason, which I don't think that they will, but if the Chargers go 0-3 to start the regular season, well, let's see. You'll already be one game down to a divisional opponent. Who knows how many more you'll be down to the Broncos and the Raiders by the time that week rolls around. Yeah, that's cause for concern. It's definitely cause for concern. You can't go 0-3, especially to the most likely division winner of this team, and expect to come back and do something. It's very hard when you put yourself in that type of a hole and then basically have to rely on the rest of the season to have that mentality of saying, well, especially if your goal is making the playoffs, is to say, okay, well, we're in week 6, but we already need to treat this as a must-win game. And the rest of the games from here on out, we have to win, or else we have no shot at making the playoffs. So an 0-3 start, that's going to be tough to overcome. So, yeah, I could understand why people would start hitting the panic button if that happened.
So week 1, we're going up against Washington football team. Week 2, going up against Dallas. Week 3, Kansas City. Week 4, the Raiders. Week 5, the Browns. Week 6, the Ravens. Like, that's a gauntlet. And then you have the bye. And then revenge season going up against the Patriots. At that point, let's just snap the line at week 8. That means we'll have 7 games played. What should Chargers fans hope for their record to be?
If you go through that first 6 weeks and you come out with a 3-3 record, that should be acceptable for you, because when you get towards the end of the season, when you start looking at like teams playing like the back end of the NFC West, you get the Eagles, you get the Giants, you get the Vikings. I don't think that the Steelers are going to be what they once were before, especially this probably most likely being Ben Roethlisberger's final year. Still going to be serviceable. Traditionally, the Chargers have not fared well against the Steelers, but I think things will change now. You throw in the Texans in that schedule. You can possibly go 1-1 again with Denver. You should beat the Bengals again. You have the Raiders. The stupid phrase on paper, you should beat them and go 2-0 against this year. So you get past the first 6 games of the season. The second half is significantly easier to navigate. So if you can get to 3-3 at that point in the season and then take the Patriots game and then on, I think that should be looked at as a win and something that you could still compete with.
All right, so 500. Honestly, like 2-4, like it doesn't sound great, but like that's a really tough schedule to get through. Jake, fun question. Can you think of any like fun memories? I know you've been to a training camp or two. Of all the times you've been, are there any fun stories? I know you've shared with me a ton of them with some of the players, but when you think training camp and like your experiences, like what comes to mind?
This will always be my number one story when it comes to training camp. I will never waver on this because I've never seen anything like this and never heard of anything like this. So I believe it was the last training camp that the Chargers were in San Diego, if memory serves correctly. Mike McCoy was still the head coach, and we were part of the media team. And obviously, after practice was over, the routine is that Mike McCoy comes up, he speaks at the podium, and traditionally Phillip Rivers follows directly after him. So Mike McCoy comes up, everybody's asking him questions about how practice went, he's giving his answers. He's up there for about 10 to 12 minutes, and he's done, and Phillip Rivers is nowhere to be found. He was there practicing, we know he was there, and the representatives are saying, Phillip's Philip's a little busy right now. Well, we come to find out that he's on the field. I can't remember if it was a church group of his families or if it was a church group that he and his wife supported, but there was a group of nuns, about 4 or 5 nuns, that actually had brought a youth group with them to see the Chargers practice. Philip Rivers is out there throwing footballs to a group of nuns and these kids, not even giving a damn about the media. I didn't even see him talking to any other players. That was his one sole purpose and focus at that particular point in time. So he's out there, he's interacting with them. So again, us are just like, okay, well, he'll be ready in a little bit. We'll go talk to some other players. We'll come back. It becomes an hour later. Philip Rivers is still with this group of kids and with this group of nuns. Not only that, he walked them all the way to the bus stop. So it's now to the point where a majority of the players are off the field. They've gone off. They've gone to shower. They've gone to clean up. And finally, Rivers comes back and said, okay, I'm ready to take your guys' questions now. I just thought, from a standpoint of a guy who the media shows as the ultimate competitor, the trash talking, quarterback, some like to call him whiny type of aspect. It was one thing that you knew that none of the cameras would actually ever see or ever talk about in the mainstream media, but it was one of the best things that I ever saw. I'll never forget it. One of the coolest moments that I ever saw. And it really just shows the type of, humanitarian that Rivers is when it comes to people that are beyond his family and beyond his team, and how much that he supports them as well.
Man, I miss Philip Rivers too. Like I'm so grateful, obviously, that we have Justin Herbert, but like he was so fun and he was so positive all the time, and all his funny little phrases and dadgummits, and just he was as good of a person on the field as he was off the field. Another question came in here, Jake. I'll let you answer this one. Do you think Staley will call the defensive plays all year? And what would cause him to stop calling the defensive plays? Obviously, we got Ronaldo Hill coming in, who I think brings a really good edge to this as like experience playing defense. Obviously, Brandon Staley is savant when it comes to the defense. But do you think that Staley will call defensive plays all year? And if not, what would either the team or Ronaldo Hill have to do to show that they don't need Staley doing it anymore?
I think Staley had said it during his, if I remember correctly, his introductory press conference, that his intentions were to still call all of the defensive plays. So obviously, as a head coach, normally you don't take on that many responsibilities, but he wants it. He wants everything that he could possibly get his hands on. I think the one thing that would stop Brandon Staley from calling the plays is, God help me, as if your defense started looking worse than it did last year. He'd have to admit it to himself mid-season, if that was the case, that he failed, and to humbly say, somebody get this away from me because I'm not doing it right.
Okay, another one. We're going to go rapid fire here. Blue Deftone has chimed in with a question. Hot off the press, Xavier Howard requested a trade today. Jake, did you hear that?
I did hear this, yes.
Do you think the Chargers should give up a first and a fifth and strap Harris to get Xavier Howard? So before you answer that question, how much would you be willing to give up for Xavier Howard, which I'm assuming you'd want him? And if so, would you do that?
I mean,
first, fifth, Chris Harris Jr.
Anybody that looks at the talent that Xavier Howard has and has displayed, obviously it's going to be a high round pick to acquire him for whoever it is. For me, though, from a financial standpoint, when you start looking at the numbers of his contract on top of the draft capital that's being proposed here, on top of additionally weakening your secondary by also sending one of your players in the deal. And this is after you spent a high draft pick on Asante Samuel Jr. This is after you gave Michael Davis a good chunk of money in free agency. that would just sound a little bit steep to me. And I understand. I'm not like completely vetoing the trade. I'm not saying that I wouldn't want him. But in that type of scenario, when I look at what the Chargers have already done for their secondary position, not to say that they can't get better, because obviously they always could. But I think that wouldn't be a trade that they would honestly be pursuing. I know it looks good. I know a lot of people would want that, and that would be insane. But to me, it's just, so you're telling me that you're going to sit one of the high draft picks that you selected on the bench if you go get Xavier Howard and have him start across Mike Davis, while you also gave up one of, and truly your biggest vet that you have on this team, and traditionally one of the best slot cornerbacks in Chris Harris. Just the aspects of it don't entirely make the best sense. Not impossible, but to me, when I start thinking about connecting all the dots, I just don't see that leading to an equation that brings Xavier Howard to the Chargers.
I'm going to bring up this question again. I'm going to answer it swiftly and succinctly.
You're just going to say yes.
No, hell no. I'm not doing
this. Look at you.
No.
All right.
No, we got Mike Davis on a pretty team-friendly contract. We just got Asante Samuel Jr., who is the perfect corner for Brandon Staley. We talked about it all offseason before the draft. And we have Strap Harris. I know he's getting a bit long in the tooth, a little bit older, but he's still very, very good. He was hurt for 6 to 8 games last year, or else he would have had a lot more impact. Like, the secondary is not bad. We don't need a complete rebuild. We don't need to throw it all away for Xavier Howard. Not taking anything away from Xavier Howard, because he's a great player. But for this team specifically, the secondary, corners and safeties, I don't think this is going to sound stupid. I don't think it's an Xavier Howard that this team is missing for it to take its next step. Like, that's what we got in theory when he drafted Asante Samuel. Like, so to answer Blue Deftone, thank you so much for the question, but I'm going to respectfully say, no, I would not do it. Nor do I think they should. Yes, Jake, do you think they should do it?
No, I don't think that they should do it. I think, again, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but if it was me and I was asked, if I was just looking at from, as you like to say, Dan, the 5,000 foot view, the way that this team would operate, and then if the Chargers hadn't made any moves in supporting their secondary, if they didn't potentially have a future, if this was Mike Davis's last deal, if they didn't end up getting Asante Samuel Jr., then we're talking about a completely different scenario here. But looking at that, since you just gave the chunk of money to Michael Davis, and then hypothetically, if you were to bring on Xavier Howard in his contract, that is a lot of money that you have just wrapped up into your secondary. And let's not forget, you still have Derwin James's contract coming up that you have to pay for. I mean, it's just common knowledge that we can't pay everybody. It's impossible to do. We just can't do that. So no, it's not a deal that I could see the Chargers making. And at the price that was just proposed, no, I definitely wouldn't do that.
Would you do Chandler Jones over Xavier Howard? If you had to take one, which would you take? If you had to trade for one.
That would be interesting given his contract scenario. And now see, this is something that's different because Uchenna Nwosu is technically in a contract year right now. But both players are kind of opposite side of the spectrum. Chandler Jones is obviously the older of the pass rushers, but can still definitely be productive. I would love to see what Chandler Jones and Joey Bosa could do as a combination between pass rushers. That would be, that'd be mouthwatering for sure. But I think, again, when you couple the aspects of the price tag and what the Chargers have currently in their roster, I'll say this. The big free agent splash or the big trade is not coming at this point of the season. If it's something that the Chargers find to do, which traditionally I haven't seen them execute something until, if I remember correctly, Chris Chambers way back in the day when they gave up a second round.
Too.
Yeah, when they gave up a second round pick for him. The Chargers just don't traditionally make moves like this. So I think, again, if this was still Gus Bradley's led defense, I may have a different opinion right now, given how he runs it. If we had gotten a fair shot to see how Uchenna Nwosu has played, which we haven't, then I'd probably have a different opinion about it. But for Brandon Staley, for the fact that we have not even seen this team play its first game yet, with certain players getting their real first opportunity with a first-time head coach, let's just wait and see first, guys. Let's wait and see.
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting point. If we had a Gus Bradley defense still, and when they talked about it ad nauseum, which that's kind of become our buzzword other than me saying gem, which I have not said it once until just now.
No, that's actually your second time because you said it at the beginning of the episode because I was keeping track. So, Craig R. Smith, you'll be proud of me for that one.
I totally thought I had made it that far. I totally lost track of what I was going to say. Thanks for that.
You were going to say if this was still Gus Bradley's defense, and I'm sure.
Thank you. Live TV. If this was still Gus Bradley's defense, I would be more interested in a Xavier Howard or a Chandler Jones because that defense puts folks on an island constantly. And there isn't this scheme to kind of cover up other people's weaknesses. And there isn't this kind of constant influx of different, being multiple, different schemes coming in and out. Not that you don't need top end talent, because obviously teams need to have that to win championships. But in a Brandon Staley led defense, you have the talent already. You have the top end talent as is. And I don't necessarily think, you could always have more, sure. But it would be more valuable to have those guys if we didn't have a scheme like what Brandon Staley's bringing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, having someone who could coach up a Mike Davis or a Brandon Faison, or having someone who can take Nazir Adderley to the next step, that's what Brandon Staley is there for. He's not there to bring in all of these amazing players, which you could, but that's what makes him such a unique and such an interesting and a coveted coach. Was he put so much effort into building the talent from within that it makes your team look that good, to where that need for top end talent isn't as crucial as it would be in a Gus Bradley vanilla type scheme, which sidebar, can't wait to see what that looks like in Raiderland. All right. So we're wrapping up our first ever live stream. We're talking all things Chargers training camp, what's coming soon for this whole team, this whole fan base. Let's see. Do we have any other questions or comments coming through? Here's a good question for you, Jake. Jesse Williams asked the question, who will get the first interception of the regular season? Here's your time. Jake Hefner, call your shot, sir. First interception for the Los Angeles Chargers in 2021 goes to...
Why do I feel like it's going to be Chris Harris? I don't know. The familiarity with Brandon Staley's scheme going back to Denver, just hearing him talk about how hyped up he is when we've had him on the show a couple of times now. I don't know. Something would just tell me that it would just be an errant ball thrown over the middle and him in the slot position. It's either off of a ricochet or he just picks it off because it was underthrown to the tight end. Something just tells me that Chris Harris could get the first interception of the year. For a split second there, I wanted to go off the rail and say Asante Samuel's going to do it. Obviously, the obvious choice would be Derwin James is going to get it. Nasir Adderley could have been a choice. But something's telling me Chris Harris could get it.
Okay. Now, just saying, if Nazir Adderley is the one who gets that first interception, I'm going to lose my absolute bleep because I have been conductor of that hype train since day one, and I cannot wait to see him ball out. But I honestly, it would not surprise me at all if it would be someone deep on the depth chart. Give it to Brandon Faison. Give it to Mark Webb, someone who is just brought into the right place at the right time and is put in a position to succeed. Like, I would love it if it was just like a no-name guy getting the first one, because like that would show me all I need to know about this coaching staff. Like, we know Asante Samuel Jr. is going to get an interception. Like, we know Derwin James can do it. We know Chris Harris Jr. can do it. But like, it's the underbelly that I've always been concerned with. That would be, if I had money on it, I think it's going to go to one of the guys in the depth piece.
Interesting.
Here's a fun question for you, Jake. In a celebrity boxing match, which AFC West head coach wins in a tournament? Now, Jake, you're a big proponent of UFC, so we could take this boxing or we could take UFC. Sidebar, this episode is brought to you by UFC Fit in Temecula. They're actually having a grand opening in 1 week on Sunday the 31st. Grand opening. We're actually going to be doing a giveaway. We're going to be giving away 1 free premium year membership to UFC Fit in Temecula. So you can go celebrity boxing or UFC for the sake of this conversation. Which AFC West head coach wins the tournament? And I don't think it's Brandon Staley. I'm sorry.
It's not, my brain goes to it. It would be a match between Andy Reid and Gruden, hands down. Andy Reid's obviously going to have the size on Gruden, so so we're talking boxing match here, so maybe he's got the knockout power. Gruden's going to be able to move a little bit more on him, I think. He'll probably end up being a little bit more aggressive. Gruden's definitely going to be trash-talking him in the ring for sure. I'll still side with Andy Reid. I'll still say that he's got the one-punch KO power that could change everything because of the size.
But do you see him as a fighter?
Do I see him as a fighter? No. Have I seen him angry on the field, even going all the way back to his days in Philly? Yes, I have. I mean, have I seen Gruden get angry on the field? Damn straight. I'm more intimidated by that than anything. But, hey, man, just, some big guys you just don't screw with.
I don't know, dude. Vic Fangio.
Fangio?
He scares me.
Why does he scare you, Dan? We're talking boxing here. He's 62 years old. I mean, come on. We're talking boxing.
Age is just a number. And how old is Andy Reid, by the way? Just saying. I think if I had to go...
No, I get your point. I'm just saying, I think... just looking at things at a surface level.
Okay, surface level. I'm going Fangio. I'm going Fangio, but my dark horse is Gruden. Like, I think if you get Chucky mad, like I can see him just going absolute ape shit.
Okay, and to my aspect, I just shot myself in the foot by talking about age because Andy Reid is 63 years old. But to me, Andy Reid intimidates me a hell of a lot more than Vic Fangio does in a boxing match.
Okay, fair. Folks are sleeping on Gruden. I guess folks think Brandon Staley's got Gruden, huh? I don't.
Brandon Staley seems like he would
outsmart him.
Yeah, he'd outsmart him. He'd come up with like the game plan. He would give the game plan to Andy Reid to tell him how to beat him. That's what Brandon Staley would do. So he could screw with people's head all he wants, but when it comes to just the physical aspects of the game, I can't pick Staley right now.
All right, fastest 40 on the roster. Is it Mike Davis? Now, like, this isn't a question of who had the fastest 40 time coming out of college. This is like right now. Who do you think on this team has the fastest 40? And let's make this more fun. Fastest 40 in pads. Who would you say it is?
Pads. Michael Davis has to be at the top of this list, obviously. Tyron Johnson. We forget the type of speed that Tyron Johnson has. I know some people are saying Jalen Guyton as well, but Tyron Johnson is deceptively fast. We saw what he can do last year when he gets into open field. I'd probably put it between those two guys right now.
You know who I'm going to say is the winner of this 40 time? Friend of the show, Fernando Ramirez. Corn dogs, Jackie!
Corn dogs, Jackie!
But this guy has the audacity to say that Jake's movie takes are better than mine.
And he's not wrong.
Who has finished Captain America Winter Soldier?
Who just finished
No.
Hang on a second. No. You can't say that without saying the fact that it took you 4 times to finish Captain America and the Winter Soldier. 4 times.
Look, I did my best. And I love the movie. Fernando, I'm sorry, but I did make it through. Thank you for tuning in.
He just did it this week, Fernando. When we had you on the show, I know how pissed off you were back then. He just finished it this week. Insane.
Selling me out. All right, Jake, we're man of the people. We're going to keep this thing going. Thoughts on Brandon Faison? You and I talked about it in our cornerback depth chart breakdown episode where we talk about position battles. And one of the things I said about Brandon Faison is I think we're going to see more of him than people realize. And Coach Staley was high on Brandon Faison and kind of talked about him as being like one of the kind of types that he likes in a cornerback. I'm very bullish on this entire cornerback room, and Brandon Faison has all of the like athletic traits, but we haven't seen much. Now, have we seen Brandon Faison get taken advantage of on the football field? Yes. Do I think that this coaching staff can develop him to be a better player than that? Also, yes.
Yeah, with Brandon Faison, when we were talking about our cornerback breakdown, next to Mike Davis, he's actually one of the bigger cornerbacks that is part of this group. And yes, it's not a secret for the times that he has got taken advantage of, for the times that he has gotten burned. We know from the aspect of when one of our starters would went down and Brandon Faison would come into the game, the opposing quarterbacks would immediately target him. And then it was just like 3 or 4 straight passes after that. And whether it was on a short wheel route or a holding penalty, pass interference, whatever it is, he's definitely had his shares of rough times when it has come to his playing time thus far in the NFL. But, I think on top of the praise that Brandon Staley has given him already, and I think even from the aspect of, let's not forget, before free agency really kicked off, the Chargers had released him for a short period of time, then ended up bringing him back to the team. So even with a new coaching staff, that just goes to show you some of the potential that they see from him. I know us as fans need a hell of a lot more convincing than what we have already seen thus far. But again, if we're talking about bettering Brandon Faison as a role player and a depth piece to this cornerback unit, I have some good faith that this team could do it. Okay,
Jake, I know I'm Blue Deftone. We're going to give you one movie one, and then we got another question that I can't wait to hear your answer on this. Blue Deftone is a Spider-Man fan, loves Captain America Civil War, mainly because of Spider-Man. Jake, I haven't seen that one either. I'm sorry. I know. I'm working on it.
He probably just made Blue Deftone fall out of his damn chair.
I'm sorry.
With admitting that right now.
I know. Look, I'm an honest man, and I will admit when I have not done something. Jake, I'm laughing because I know I butchered the hell out of his name with slip of the tongue when I was talking about this for me. But who is your favorite undrafted free agent?
There's quite a few, actually. I've praised my love for Forrest Merrill on this team when talking about the interior defensive line.
Yes, sir.
I just love the short, stocky, big defensive line guys. And for him, I know that the cards are extremely stacked against him to make the roster when you look at the priorities that are on this team. But I would love to see this guy make some noise in the preseason and during training camp and possibly even make this roster. He reminds me a lot of just in that Poona Ford mold. And even Poona Ford was shorter than what Forrest Merrill is. And he's now developed into a nice defensive piece for the Seattle Seahawks. I know that I still haven't given enough practice to his name, but Eamon, help me out here, Dan, just to correctly pronounce his last name because I butcher it every time.
I want to hear it. Say it.
Agbagima. that's how it came out to me, but I definitely need some practice on that. That probably is the top one if we're talking about who's got the best chance of making the roster, because when you look at the linebackers beyond Kaiser White, Drew Tranquill, and of course Kyler Murray, it's definitely a toss-up for some of the guys that, obviously you brought in Nick Neiman, but who's going to take the fifth spot? Who's going to round that group out? If you haven't done so already, please go read the article by Carter Donick from the Draft Network, because he wrote up a whole piece on Amon and why he is his favorite to make the Chargers roster, and for very good reason. And he definitely lists them all. So it's definitely a good article to read.
I would say who my favorite and who I also think has one of the better chances of making the team, and we talked about it on the safety episode.
Make sure you pronounce his name correctly.
I know. Our good friend out of UNC Charlotte, Ben DeLuca. For folks who have not seen or heard or read about Ben DeLuca, check him out. He reminds me a lot of what a Alohi Gilman looked like coming out of college. Like he wasn't the most athletic, didn't have the greatest 40 times, didn't have all of these crazy interceptions, but he was always around the ball, always making plays, and he just had a lot of football IQ. And so I think who I can see making the team purely based off like his versatility, it might be Ben DeLuca, but he's going to have to ball out on special teams, which there's going to be a log jam of folks who are going to need to kind of be versatile and also do special teams well. And so I like him a lot, but I just don't know if there's room for him at the safety position. But I think he's probably my favorite. Jake, we have Los Angeles Chargers training camp starting tomorrow. For those who are watching, who have watched this entire time, thank you so much for joining us. This has actually been a blast. Jake, do you want to do this again? This is actually super fun.
Hell yeah, we're going to do it again.
Sweet. So that's going to do it for this episode. So we've gotten into all of the biggest storylines for the Chargers going into this camp. We've talked about Derwin James, the return of Derwin James. We talked about Justin Herbert. We've talked about the players who have all hopefully learned from their mistakes last year coming in. We talked about this new coaching scheme. We've talked about special teams. We've talked about your favorite stories. We've talked about butchered names. We've answered question and answers for what seems like 3 minutes, but it's already been over an hour and a half, which is crazy. Last thing on our agenda, Jake, is we get to announce the winner of the Chargers Unleashed giveaway. So for folks who have not seen this, we had a giveaway that we announced, I want to say, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago or so?
2 weeks ago.
And let me see if I can pull this up. This is live TV, so I apologize if I can't. So folks, all they had to do was follow LAC_Unleashed. That's us. Retweet and then comment which player they were excited to see play in 2021. And they got a chance to win this freaking sick clock. Eat, sleep, slay, repeat. Keenan Allen inspired clock by JD Messina.
Real quick question. When did Chargers Unleashed become, the home shopping network? I feel like it's 2 a.m. and the infomercials are on.
Normally, you can get this for 3 easy payments of $19.95, but today,
there it is.
You can get it for free by entering. So what we have done, we have this handy dandy randomizer and randomize all of the folks who have been in this.
Very long drum roll, dude.
Can you see it?
No, so you may as well just announce it.
Okay, here we go. You ready?
Oh, let's have it.
The draw has been made. I think you can see my screen. The winner is at Kevin Kernick, at KEVINCURNICK on Twitter. We had 64 folks that had left comments and retweeted. The winner of the clock is at Kevin Kernick. If you're listening, send us a DM. Let us know your details, and we'll get it over to you. Congratulations. You win the clock. Sorry for that technical difficulties, Jake. That took me 34 minutes to figure out how to get that on the screen.
No worries. You did your job.
I tried. I did my best. Okay, guys, this has been a blast. This has been so much fun. We had a hoot talking to all of you. Shout out to Jesse Williams, Adrian Scott. Shout out to Shred74. I'm just going to keep trying to figure out how to pronounce his name. I'm going to put up a bunch of these comments as we go. Jesse Williams, you're awesome. Predictions of head coaching for the Rivers family going to be awesome in Alabama, apparently. Blue Deftone, we've got real Fernando Ramirez, the real one. Kenzel Tijamo, love you. Thank you so much for joining. We've got Jake. You got to help me with this one.
I just saw his name come up right now. I think you actually nailed that one. So
I needed it. Dark Basin. We've got Steve Haglund that was in here before. Clever name of You've Got No Chance in Hell. Would like to see us do trivia.
Hey, that man is touching all my nostalgic buttons right there with that. Love that. Keep doing your McMahon thing.
We are going to potentially have to add that to our repertoire. Bolt Up 2000, thank you so much for joining. Tyler Lawrence, a.k.a. the Master Bolt. Will Schupa, Steve Haglund, all of you. Blake Mullinger. There's been so many guys here. It's been so much fun. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let us know what you think in the comments. Should we do this again? This is actually, I can't believe we made
Questions
it through.
Been answered, sir. We will do this again.
Yes, we have made it through an hour and 30 minutes of pre-training camp discussions. Guys, we will be bringing you all of the content for training camp for these Chargers. We are going to start tomorrow. You'll be seeing us many, many times in the coming days. Again, congratulations to the winner of the clock. Jake, anything we want to tell the good people, the great friends, other than please, if you have not already, subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on anywhere you get your podcasts. Be a friend of the show. Don't worry. You can always talk to us. Give us any feedback. We'll take it all. Other than that, Jake, anything you want to share with the good friends?
You know what? I'm just happy that football is back, sir. It's officially back. It's we're still 44 days away from the regular season game, but I don't care. We didn't have preseason in 2020. Regardless what your opinions are on preseason and how some people may see it to be completely meaningless. How did you feel last year in not having it? Because I love to have football back in August. It's training camp time again. And the biggest aspect of them all is that fans are back. Fans are back. And I can't wait for the atmosphere of training camp, games, and everything that takes place during an NFL season to be carried out. I'm stoked. I'm hyped. Let's go.
Let's go. I cannot wait. Training camp has finally made it. We are, on the East Coast, it's already training camp day one. People are going to be here today. Shout out New York City. Until next time, you can find Jake, my lovely co-host with a great facial hair, at Jake T. Hefner. Myself, Dan Wolkenstein, at Chargers Homer. You can find us on Twitter at LAC_Unleashed. Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Jake, to get us hyped, I'm going to play our intro one more time to watch all the players we can see ball out starting tomorrow at training camp. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We will talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. Shout out Manscaped, Charger Bolt Family, Brewery X, UFC Fit Temecula, and all of you, all of the folks who have come in to listen to us and watch. This has been a blast. We will talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed. Talk to you later.
You have to be really intentional about putting a team together.
I was in!
Crawled out of the pile and started screaming.
How good is Joey Bosa?
Herbert, rolling, looking, throwing, end zone, touchdown, intercepted. Derwin James. Derwin was there.
You got to be on a mission every day in the NFL. But even more than that, you got to be on a mission together.
Great hands, Keenan Allen.
The Los Angeles Chargers select Rashawn Slater.
Asante Samuel Jr.
That was late. Stop! Oh, I'm stopping y'all boys. I can't catch it.
Intercepted. Picked off by Michael Davis. Explosiveness from Eckler. There's RP4. He blew that up, didn't he? It is picked off. Nasir Adderley. 50-50 ball is 100%. Mike Williams.
Ojeda, Nwosu, and that will end it.
Time to bolt up.